You're right, guys. Shay here. Uneven bounce. Hope you guys are well. So England cap off a remarkable comeback, fantastic win yesterday in Manchester, the third and final test of the Wisdom Trophy, beating the West Indies by 269 runs. Fantastic win. I'm here today with three fantastic guests to discuss all the major talk points and break down the test. I've got, first of all, Joe Nuttall from the 22 Yards podcast. I've got Dan from Cricket Fanatics magazine, and I've got Nakul Pande from Guerilla Cricket. Obviously, Nakul, you're new to the show. Obviously, Joe and Dan are returning. In terms of Guerilla Cricket, guys, I'm sure you guys know about them. If you don't, go and check them out. They do live ball-by-ball commentary internationally. They cover all the home tests. They're very active on Twitter. They produce some fantastic content. So go check those guys out. Lads, how you guys doing?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, man.
Good, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Excellent.
Sad test cricket's gone.
Indeed, yeah. Well, today, obviously, Dan, we haven't got Rabi here today, flying the flag for the West Indies. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to put you in that position so you can, represent just the next hour or so. If I start, obviously, with the toss, Jason Holders obviously won it and put England in, which is quite an interesting decision, I think, on all parts. If I go to you, Dan, first of all, seeing that, was you surprised somewhat? Would you have had a bat first? What would you have done?
No, I wasn't actually surprised, to be honest. I think that was solely based on England going in with a batsman short. They went in with the 5 bowlers, and they only had the 6 batsmen on their side. And we saw that they were in trouble initially. They were sitting on about 120 for 4, the English.
Yeah.
And at the crease, they had Ollie Pope and Jos Buttler. Obviously, both solid players, but no runs in the series, So it seemed for the first 2 sessions that it was the right call. They backed their bowlers, and they knew they were coming up against only 6 English batsmen, and it almost paid off. They were 1 wicket away from that test match being a lot closer than the scoreline suggests, in my opinion.
I mean, the question that came to my mind was that they played, obviously, the extra spin in Rakeem Cornwall, and they went in, obviously, had a ball first, which was surprising to me. I thought we'd had a bat first and get caught on that kind of, day 5 pitch. And we'll get to call a bit later on. I mean, if I throw the same question at you, Joe, what was your feelings as an England fan when, obviously, we were asked about first?
Well, I was surprised that the West Indies bowled first. I was, to be honest, nervous going into the game with the, as Dan said, the 5 bowlers. Stokes obviously didn't bowl a ball in the test, which was obviously disappointing from an England perspective, but I guess we need to save him, of course. But yeah, personally, I was surprised. I was worried that, when England went into bat, and especially sort of when the second morning when, a few of the guys got out when Pope and Butler were out, and then Wokes chopped onto his stumps, and then Broad and Archer got out, of course, as well. And then Broad sort of saved the day, really, as he's done so often in his career. So yeah, I was a bit worried, but look, I guess it kind of did show through the lack of batsmen in the England side. And if it wasn't for Broad, the test could have been a lot different.
Yeah, I think the key contributors, obviously, in that first innings, I mean, just going back to what Dan said, England 122 for 4. You've got out-of-form batsman, hopefully out-of-form batsman, and Josh Buttler partnered up with Ollie Pope, who's made nothing in the series going into that 5th wicket partnership. They put on 140 for the 5th wicket. But I say that, Knuckle, I mean, what was your feelings when Pope and Buttler were at the crease together? Did you think they would kick on like they did, or did you think it was going to be another English collapse?
Josh Butler's a curious one. He's not been as out of form as people have said he is, and with Josh Butler, a lot people fall into one or two camps. Either they think that he's going to dominate Test cricket like he dominates one-day cricket, or they think he's completely useless. As ever, the truth is somewhere in the middle. If Josh Butler can provide contributions like he did in that first innings, and as he did, to be fair, in the first innings of the other 2 tests, that's a really useful thing for England to have. No one's asking him to be either Gilchrist or ODI Josh Buttler. But I thought the positivity they played with was really impressive, and the way they were able to score at 3.5 and over, taking minimal risks, knocking the ball into the gaps, working what was obviously a very tiring West Indies team, and they've been in this bubble for now, a month and a half. And as you could see, they had that initial burst with Kemar Roach on the first morning, bowled beautifully. Roach just gets a wicket in his first over. It's all going well. Shannon Gabriel somehow manages to get himself back on the field after 2 tests in a row and going off and then coming back on again. Jason Holder is just Jason Holder. You know what he's going to do. But as Pope and Buttler got through that initial phase and then were able to reassert control, you could see them almost literally running the West Indies ragged. So I thought it was a really well-paced innings from both of them. Ollie Pope is a class act. He really is. You don't get a first-class record like his over the last couple of years without being a really good player. And he is someone who the temptation is going to be, I think the only thing that can go wrong for him is that he gets moved up the order too early before he's really established himself. Just let him be for a little while. And Josh Buttler has, I don't know if saved, but certainly prolonged his Test career for a little while. I thought it was a fantastic partnership, and they scored more fluently than anyone else managed on that pitch for the entire Test. Just going back to the toss, I think that it's not so much that the West Indies chose to bowl first, is that they chose not to bat first. People talk about England's top order. The West Indies top order has been misfiring for years now, and Jason Holder knows that better than anyone. He chooses to bowl more than almost any other captain in the world. And it's because it is partly defensive decision making and going, and that kind of you alluded to it with picking Cornwall, picking 2 spinners and then on a pitch that does take turn, and then opting to bowl first on a pitch where no one wins bowling first. So there's that slightly scrambled decision making which we hadn't seen in the series up until then.
Thank you, Nakul. I mean, it's actually a good point you mentioned there. If you do think about it, I think it's more down to the fact that he's lost faith, I guess, over the last couple of years in this top 6. Unfortunately, it's down to someone like him, time and time again, to drag him out of the mud, really. And do you think, though? I mean, if you go back to obviously the batting, and you mentioned about Ollie Pope and Josh Buttler, do you feel like the fact that it was Ollie Pope who was there partnering Josh Buttler, that maybe because he was a youngster still kind of feeling his way into the game and into his career, that maybe Josh Buttler took it upon himself as a kind of senior player to play a certain way and kind of assist Pope and make it almost be more motivation for him to stick around and build that partnership with Pope?
It's hard to tell who was the dominant partner in that partnership, to be honest, but what I did think worked really well, and you see this a little bit when Butler's batting with Stokes or Root, because they're both looking for the run, for the single all the time. They're both kind of on that same wavelength of trying to maximize scoring opportunities. And it allowed Buttler, who has become a little bit, understandably, when you're playing for your place all the time and you've got all this media attention and whatever on you, you can become a bit tense and you can miss out on scoring opportunities. And Buttler has fallen into this trap before, as he did the first time when he got dropped, of trying to play too much like a quote-unquote proper Test batter, rather than, no one's expecting him to, smack every ball for 6. But that element of positivity and that his ability to score more fluently and quicker than other people without taking risks. Ollie Pope's got that too. And the two of them fed off each other really well.
Thank you. Joe, just going to obviously just back onto Ollie Pope there, as Nakul mentioned. I mean, a lot of people compared him with Ian Bell. Though Ian Bell played 118 Test matches, averaged almost 43, over 7,500 Test runs. So a lot of people compared the two of them. Do you feel Ollie Pope, he's averaging 43 in his first 10 Test matches, do you feel he will surpass the achievements of Ian Bell? Or do you feel like he will be have a similar career to Ian Bell in terms of, I think, I'll be completely honest, I'm not the biggest Ian Bell fan. I know a lot of people are. I'm not. I'm not sure the exact stats of it, but I do believe that the majority of his centuries, all the batsmen in the team, in either innings, also scored a century. He was never really a player, in my opinion, who was to drag England out of the mud and kind of win Test matches for them consistently. He was obviously a very, very technically strong player, Moslow's cover drive, etc. But I just feel like Ian Bell mentally wasn't maybe the strongest player throughout his England career. Do you feel Ollie Pope is the same kind of, a similar kind of player to say Ian Bell, or do you think it's completely different, Joe?
Well, I can actually see Joe Root a little bit in Ollie Pope as well, especially off the back foot. I think he reminds me a lot of Joe Root. Personally, I don't really like comparisons in the media in the wide media, because I do feel like it piled a lot of pressure onto certain players. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I do feel like
any English all-rounder being called the new Botham or the new Flintoff.
There you go. Or the new Stokes in this case now, maybe nowadays. But yeah, so I don't really like comparisons as such. But yeah, I mean, obviously he's early on in his Test career, and it's going to be hard to tell now. But I do think he's a great player, and he's the kind of player who you think, obviously he struggled in the series, but especially in South Africa when he came to the crease, I was like, okay, a bit more calmness at the crease, especially if England, which they can do at times, sort of rush and get a bit frantic at the crease. I feel like, when he comes to the crease, it's a bit calmer, and everything sort of not quietens down as such, but England starts to dominate a little bit more when Pope's at the crease. And I just think he's a great player technically, and it seems to be a great player mentally, seems to have a great attitude and just great resilience to the game.
Where do you see Ollie Pope batting for England in, say, 2 years' time, Joe?
See, that's a tricky one. That I think that depends a lot on who else is playing. I mean, Pope could easily bat anywhere from 4 to 6, maybe 3 as well. And right now he's doing well at 6. I mean, he actually batted 5 in this Test, but so maybe that's his natural position. But he's doing well at 5 and 6. Maybe when Root retires, which hopefully won't be for a few years yet, Ollie Pope moves up to number 3 or moves up to number 4. But I think for now, like when he first played his Test, when he first made his Test debut, I think he was batted too high up. I think did he bat 3 or 4?
He batted 4, having never batted 4 for Surrey.
Yeah, there you go. So I think that was too high. Well, it definitely was. Personally, I would stick with him. As Nakul said earlier, I would just stick with him at number 5 or 6, depending on the side, and just it's too early to change him yet, and see how he goes, and then if the time's right, move him up the order.
And Dan, Ollie Pope's batter partner we mentioned before on the first day, showing that 145th wicket partnership with Josh Buttler. Obviously, he's made 67 in that first innings. He's not done anything pretty much for the past 18 months. In fact, I wrote down here in the notes, he's averaged 24, just over, in the last 18 months, but 32 average overall. Do you feel that 67 has kind of spent his place for the Pakistan series starting next week? Or would you still feel he's maybe one failure away from being replaced?
I'd say in the top 7 for England, he's definitely, his position in the side is probably the most vulnerable at the moment. I think Rory Burns, Dom Sibley, Zach Crawley. I think Zach Crawley will definitely come back into the side. Joe Root, Ben Stokes, and Ollie Pope is a very, very solid top 6. I think that competes with all the other top 6s in the world at the moment.
Okay.
England are too good a side to have someone averaging in the 20s, batting for them, or who's picked as a batsman, right? Who's picked to score runs. Obviously, is a wicketkeeper. But in my opinion, England aren't short on glovemen. England are not short on blokes who can keep wicket and score runs. A part of me thought that he would be sent to the ODI side to play against Ireland, and I thought Folkes would come in, or not necessarily Folkes, but I thought another keeper would come in, perhaps Besso or whatever. I do think he will play all 3 games against Pakistan. I think they've, if he wasn't dropped leading into the series or during the series, he won't be dropped after what he did in the 3rd Test.
Do you not think he'd be under pressure? Let's say if he fails in the first Test next week, let's say he fails in the first 2 Test matches, would you bring Ben Folkes in for the 3rd one, or do you persist with Buttler like they have for so long now?
Yeah, it's difficult, man. I mean, like it's not like he's a 22-year-old that's come in.
He's almost 30.
and still has a decade to develop his game. If Zach Crawley was struggling technically, I would say, guys, it's fine. He's got time to develop into the player we need him to develop into. I'd go as far as to say you're fully developed as a batsman at 30. That's probably a bit controversial, but by the time you've got to 30, you know your game. The strengths, you know your weaknesses. I just ask myself, you know, if it's the Ashes and Mitchell Starc and Pat Cummins are bowling, you know, do you back Josh Buttler? You know, if you 95, do you back him to rebuild the innings? You know, personally, I don't see him being the long-term option for England. I can't see him keeping wicket for the English Test side for the next five years. You know, he's still got 5 years, five years of Test cricket in him. He's one of the most destructive white ball batsmen in the world. You know, he should be playing every ODI, every T20. I mean, he should be in the World Cup 2023 plans. You know, he could.
I think he's very much there. I think he's very much in those plans. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
He's a good candidate to captain that team.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. You know, and like I said, England are not short on Gloveman at the moment. So personally, I would shift into the white ball side and tell him your plan for the next 4 years is to win us the World Cup in 2023. That's that's what we need you to do. Yeah. We need you to win the ODI World Cup and the T20 World Cup. And one of three boys can take over from the Test side. So absolutely he's under pressure. He'll feel relieved that the T did really well. Very uncharacteristic of him to you know, that's in my opinion not the role that England sort of wants him to play. He's more the kind of guy that I would want in on 300 for 5. You know, to come in and absolutely demoralize a bowling attack. You know, score 100 of 70 balls and absolutely demoralize the bowling attack. To necessarily pull you out of trouble with a 23-year-old who's in his 5th Test or whatever. So he played well, but absolutely he's under pressure. He has to be. You know, like I said, England are far too good a side to have a guy averaging in the 20s over the last 18 months.
And actually, you mentioned obviously the style of play maybe should be adopting. Nakul, if I go to you on this, let's say that Chris Silverwood persists. Ed Smith obviously seems to like him a lot. Silverwood persists with Buttler in the Test team for the foreseeable future. How would you be asking him to play his game? Should he be bringing this ODI kind of style into the Test arena, or should we simply just continue to adapt his Test game?
Josh Buttler himself said before the 3rd Test that he doesn't think that. I don't know if they're ODI batting, but certainly his style of ODI batting, he doesn't think that's replicable in Test cricket for various reasons. And as you said, Dan, like he knows his game pretty well by now. He thinks about the game pretty deeply. And so I think that we saw the template, I think. We saw that, you know, he scored at, I can't say what his strike rate was, but it was close to sort of 3.5 runs and over, you know, pushing 4 at times. That's absolutely fine for a Test number 7 in most circumstances. That's absolutely fine. There's no problem with that for somebody coming in at number 7, and he's got that ability to accelerate. The thing, I often think this with a lot of players who have a lot of shots and have a lot of ability. Josh Buttler almost doesn't realize how good he is still after all this, I think. And I think may well take from this innings that he has the ability to shift those gears in Test cricket as he does shift up through the gears smoothly rather than jump from block to slog. And I thought he batted really well, and he's batted well at times in this series. He had a really good 2018 when he came back into the team. He did quite well against India, and there's 250s in Sri Lanka, completely different. One of them sweeping almost every ball. Before the next Test, he watches a video of Michael Clarke coming down the track, decides to come down the track. There aren't many players who can adapt like that between Test matches. Had a really not very good at all 2019. His keeping's been fine. There's nothing particularly wrong with his keeping. Ben Foakes is obviously a better wicket keeper, and that discussion has been raging on Guerilla Cricket as it has through the rest of cricket Twitter. Personally, I was also surprised, as Dan was, that he wasn't earmarked for the white ball bubble. For the Ireland series and then for the Pakistan series the Pakistan T20s later. And as you say, he says, go help us build this white ball dynasty. You know, we got to the final of the last World T20. We've won the 50 over World Cup. There's 2 more World T20s and a 50 over World Cup coming between now and 2023. Go out and help England become the greatest white ball team the world has ever seen, and probably end up captaining it. I was surprised that was the case when you've got Ben Foakes, kind of sitting there waiting. That isn't the way they went. And if you weren't going to drop Buttler then, you're certainly not going to drop him now.
Certainly, yeah. I'd agree with a lot what you said there, Nakul. I mean, it feels like he's really working so hard in his game. I felt that in that first innings in the second test match. He made a 40 off 79 balls, I believe it was. It was like a straight to around 50. He was trying so hard to kind of get himself into form. I think he really cares about that white shirt, not just a coloured one. And I think maybe they're seeing that, because we don't see that, do we? I mean, Nakul, obviously you see a lot more than we do in your of seeing what you were doing, but I think for us a little bit more on the outside, we don't maybe see. We just see that kind of him bat at periods and see the scorecard. As in what I think he's really trying hard to become a fixture in that team, and I think he can kind of replicate anywhere close to 2018. That top 7 looks very strong rather than just top 6. I think so. But anyway, if you move on to the West Indies, Dan, I wanted to just head to you as our honorary West Indies fan today. There was a lot of talk about Raheem Cornwall, which we just quickly pointed on before, and the fact that he should have been maybe played the second test match and definitely the third. They brought him in. A lot's been said really on his kind of his shape, etc. I don't think it's really that much of an issue, to be honest with you. A lot of the players in Test cricket, I think that Tonga and Inzamam, etc., are pretty hefty as well, to be fair. And I think people forget a lot that Raheem Cornwall, I believe, is 6'8". 6'8", I think he is. I think he stands over 2 meters. So he can carry that weight, better than other people. Obviously, at 6'2", let's say. Obviously, he's come to the Test match. I think there's a fair bit of, I won't say pressure, but I think people may expect him to do quite well, especially after he performed so well against Afghanistan. I mean, basically, he's ended up with Test match figures across 2 innings, so 46 overs, known for 165, and he's got 2 LBWs, I believe, as well, 10 and 2 respectively. What was your thoughts on Cornwall? Was it simply not the right pitch and right conditions for him to excel, Dan? Or is it maybe his ability a little bit overblown? I mean, it's hard to say really after so few Test matches. I think he's played 4 Test matches, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But do you feel like maybe he's not as as good as maybe people make out, or was just a difficult match for him?
Yeah, look, I think the expectations placed on him initially were just, they thought he was going to come in and spin webs around the English top order. That was never going to happen. It's quite interesting though, because I do think that there's definitely something in that wicket for the bowlers. We saw him get a few to grip. We saw him when he put it in the areas, he got 1 or 2 to sort of bite off the wicket there. But at the same time, Best didn't do much bowling. He didn't. It wasn't a.
He didn't bowl at all. I don't believe he bowled at all, did he? Didn't bowl one ball.
I mean, it was. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Chase also was. He picked up a few, but again, he wasn't the spearhead of the West Indies attack. So it's a combination of a lot of things. So obviously the expectations were just far too high. The guy's brand new to Test cricket. You can't expect someone to perform the way he did against Afghanistan, against England. That's absurd. I do think he was a bit one-dimensional at times. He was very one-paced. He didn't use the width of his crease. He didn't use the depth of his crease. As an orthodox finger spinner, you're very limited in your ability to offer some kind of change-up. Compared to a Harbhajan Singh, who has the doosra and the straight one and whatnot. You're obviously very limited. So I would have liked to see him maybe perhaps come slightly wide of the crease and maybe bowl a bit flatter, or fall flat and throw one up, or something like that. But he was very happy to sort of walk up and toss a few up and kind of hope for the best. It didn't seem like he didn't seem threatening at any point.
Just held up an end.
Would you concur, Joe, with that, or?
Yeah, I think his role in the team was to hold up an end. Holder said, I think before the Test, I don't know if he said it live on TV at the toss, but I remember someone saying Holder said he would be the best off spinner on the show in the series. And that's the first time I've properly seen him bowl. Obviously, I've seen highlights of him, but in a match, that's the first time I've seen him bowl in a Test match. And he didn't wow me. I agree completely with what Dan said. I don't think he had enough variation, or he didn't change it up like Dan said. He was very one-dimensional, and I do think that sometimes he was there just to hold up an end and just to give the seamers a rest. You know, on day one, when he was bowling to Burns, he just kept rotating the seamers round. Obviously, Gabriel went off with an injury.
Yeah, I think he bowled a lot of overs, particularly in the second innings, that Shannon Gabriel wasn't able to bowl. I thought in the second innings he was on a hiding to nothing.
Yeah,
he was just having to bowl while England were under no pressure at all.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, Nakul, what do you think then in terms of Cornwall? What was your impression of him going into the match?
I didn't watch the whole of the Afghanistan test, but I watched chunks of it, and also his test debut against India in Jamaica. Yeah. And what I was impressed with was his ability he was getting good batters out on pitches that weren't turning with bounce. You know, I think he's 6'5". He's a big guy. He gets bounce on wickets that aren't particularly bouncing, and he got. I think in his first test, he got Pujara and Jadeja out with balls.
That was his first wicket, I think.
Yeah, and Jadeja was his second. And that pitch in Kingston wasn't turning at all. And he has that. And then he does give it a rip. He's got big hands. He's got big fingers. He does give it. He puts revs on the ball. There was a period where he was bowling to Burns and Stokes, and the ball was ripping out the footmarks, and it was really quite challenging for them to play him. And then he got 1 to 10, I think, to Joe Root that turned past leg stump, and he was getting the odd bit of bounce. Yeah. But England got more and more comfortable against him. You know, he is still learning his game very much so. It's his third test match. He's played a few seasons of first class cricket, but spinners take a long time to develop and get that craft, as you say, Dan. When to go, I was going round the wicket, particularly if the ball's turning and bouncing. Set a really straight field and go round the wicket, or go a little wider on the crease, or bowl from like sort of 24 yards every now and again. Yeah. But those little tweaks take time to build into what is a very solid, very repeatable action. And he wasn't necessarily set up to succeed with the way the West Indies went into the game and the way they were trying to go into the game with a bowling attack that finally fell apart that finally fell apart after an amazing series. I don't think he did too badly. I think he is a better off spinner than Roston Chase or Dominic Bess, but he was no more. He was fine, and I think there's enough there for the West Indies to work with. And in most circumstances, you know, the fact that Roston Chase bowls so much is probably not good long term for the West Indies. You can't expect someone to bowl in the top 5 or 6 and bowl as much as Roston Chase has had to in this series. So Cornwall balances the team really well, and I'll be really excited to watch him for the next couple of years. Plus, he hits the ball bloody hard.
Well, he's a big boy, you said, isn't it? So when he hits the ball, it stays hit, I imagine.
Just going on what he said there. So I think this is where the fitness discussion needs to come up, because the ability to get that bounce and to get that, I don't know what the word is, but to get those revs on the ball, a lot of it has to do with fitness. You know, yes, he is obviously a tall bloke, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's always going to get bounce. You know, Nathan Lyon can get the same kind of bounce on certain wickets. It involves a lot, you know, like springing off your left foot and really pivoting.
Lyon's action is phenomenally energetic.
Yeah, Nathan Lyon's a very busy off spinner. When he gets into that crease, he really explodes. You know, whereas Cornwall is a bit.
Graham Swan was very similar in that respect. Explosion at the crease. I mean,
absolutely. And that's where you want your spinner to be able to bowl spells of 10, 15, 20 overs. And I think Rakeem Cornwall doesn't have that ability. I think his
first test innings, he bowled 41 overs on a not particularly helpful pitch. Bowling fitness and fitness are slightly different things, but spin bowling is physically harder than it looks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes a big difference between, you know, being tired in your 15th over and not being tired in your 15th over. If your action starts to get lazy, you lose revs, you lose bounce, you lose 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers an hour. It makes a massive difference for a spinner, you know, especially on a wicket that's not offering too much.
I mean, I think a lot of this game is for me is down to innate talent. There's not a huge amount of, dare I say, a lot of effort in his game in terms of I appreciate, I'm a spin bowler myself. I've bowled for over 10 years, long spells for various different teams. It's hard going, but for me, there's very, as you can see, it's just a slow amble to the crease. It's all in the shoulder. There's no momentum created. There's not Imran Tahir. There's not, I said, Graham Swan and Nathan Lyon. It's all in the shoulder because the guy weighs 320 pounds and he's 6 foot. when 25 or whatever it is, he's a big guy, and that's why he's able to obviously get some turn on the wickets when it's assisting for him. His batting, though, his fielding. The reason he's obviously a very good slip fielder, as he's shown in this Test match, but the game is very simple for him, and I wonder if that is possibly down to maybe his lack of fitness. I agree with Nakul completely. There's bowling fitness and there's actual fitness, but I wonder if his game, if he was, let's say, 20 kgs less, let's say, would he be more busy crease? Would he play shots slightly with a bit more? Was his reflex be slightly quicker to certain balls? Would he be able to, would he be able to create momentum in his bowling?
I just wonder how much. Some people are just big.
Yes, yeah. That's true.
I wonder how much work would someone like that have to put in to lose 20 kg, and would it be worth it? Like, he's played 3 Test matches. He's had a couple of really good first-class seasons, including for West Indies. He ripped the England Lions apart a couple of years ago when the Lions were in, which actually included quite a number of this squad, plus I think Keaton Jennings and a few others. Yeah. He's obviously a good bowler who has kind of good solid fundamentals to work with. I think just let him go, and if it becomes an issue, you can work with it later. But it's too early to judge now, I think.
He's still very young as well. I think he's 26 years old, isn't he? He's not like it's just starting out still. He's still a relatively young bowler. Yeah. So
to be honest, I wouldn't mind seeing West Indies, as harsh as it sounds, say to him like, listen, mate, this is the international Test side. There are certain fitness requirements. If we've backed you, we want you to be our spinner for the next. How old? I think you said he was 26 or
26, 27. I think.
Yeah, you can play until 35, 36 as a spinner. We want you to be our spinner for the next 10 years, but you're going to have to, commit to being a more functional athlete. You don't have to say, lose X amount of weight, but is he the most functional athlete? No. Is he ever going to be the most functional athlete as a big 6'8" guy? No. But at the same time, I do definitely think that there's room for improvement there physically. It's not. I don't think that's harsh. I think it's a very fair comment. If you're going to be a frontline spinner for a Test side, then you've got to. So I've seen South Africa recently. We've dropped players for not meeting fitness standards.
Abrash Shamsi, right?
Yeah. Shamsi, JJ Smuts, Magala.
John Smuts. Yeah, I mean Magala.
There's 4 as well. There's 4 of them.
Yeah, I mean they don't look like Rakeem Cornwall. So I would like to see.
Shamsi's not too far away.
I'd like to see. Actually, after lockdown, you never know.
A few more Gatsby's, I reckon, there, Dan. So I'm sure you can get that.
Well, maybe everyone can take on Imran Tahir's celebrations, and then that's an extra copy right there.
That's hot. I think that's a
secret. But we do know who's a very good athlete, and that's Stuart Broad, the man of the series. The man of the moment. I mean, where do we start? I mean, obviously a lot was made about the fact that he missed the first Test match, was very vocal, very opinionated and open with it. The fact that he felt that it was his shirt going into that first Test match, didn't get it. Obviously, England lost, came back, man of the series. He took, I believe it was 16 wickets. 16 wickets. 16 wickets. I was going to say 16 then, but I've actually got the stat for since December 2018. He's taken 68 wickets at 21 in the last 18 months. 68 at 21, and his career average is 501 wickets now at 28. So he's a guy who's ever improving his numbers. As like I point out there, 16 wickets at 11. I mean, it's absolutely incredible to outdo Ben Stokes, who averaged 91 in this series and took 9 wickets at 16. And to only play 2 Test matches just shows how good Stuart Broad was, how critical he was to this Test match series victory. So, yeah, I mean, where do I start? I mean, I'll start with you here, Joe. Obviously, Stuart Broad. What was your thoughts on him and his impression he made on the series?
Well, firstly, when he didn't get selected for the first Test, I think that was brilliant of him to come out and say all that stuff he said. I think it was brave because it could have gone the wrong way for him, and he could have got been pushed further away from the team as a result. I don't think that was likely to happen, but I think that was brave of him to do. But I was thinking the other day, and I've just about like my favourite cricketers ever, since I've been started watching the game, and I think Stuart Broad is probably my number one favourite ever. Like, yeah, he's just unreal. I just think he's vital to that England team, and I don't see any reason why he couldn't overtake Anderson one day. I really don't, because if you think Anderson's 38 now, Broad's only 34. Anderson, what? How many wickets is Anderson on? 560.
No,
580 something.
Yeah, it's
Isn't it?
587 or something. It's
589, I think. Yeah.
maybe 589 actually. Yeah, he's touching 600.
Yeah, so literally Broad's like 88 wickets behind him, like 80 or 90 wickets behind him effectively, and he's 4 years younger than him. I don't see any reason why he can't overtake him. I just think he's pivotal to this England team, especially in places like England, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, and the West Indies as well. I think he is a key bowler in all those different countries. You could argue differently for the subcontinent. That's a different debate. But I think, especially in England and New Zealand, I would say Broad is key in those places. And his experience and what he brings to the dressing room. I think it was great seeing... I can't remember who he was talking to at the start of day 5. But he was
Keon Harding.
Was it Keon Harding? Yeah.
Keon Harding, young Bajan. He said, Broad said today on Twitter that he's a big fan of Keon Harding, and during that chat, he said this guy really wants to learn. And I think that Broad and Anderson, their ability to, there aren't many bowlers who get better after they hit 32, but both of them have. And in Broad's case, a startling. Anderson too, actually, to be fair. But like you said, Broad up until I think the end of 2016 was averaging 27. Since then, he's averaging 23.
That's what
that jump at that age is absolutely remarkable. At a point where people were starting to write him up, like before that 2015 Ashes, you might remember England went to the Caribbean in 2015, and people were saying Broad's bowling 80 miles an hour, drop him, he's done. Brilliant in the 2015 Ashes, brilliant in South Africa. Had 2 of those ridiculous Broad spells that he has, and since then he's just got better and better. I agree with Joe; he's absolutely phenomenal, and you want someone to kind of bridge that transition away from James Anderson, who has a very good claim of being England's greatest ever seen bowler. Stuart Broad is ready-made for that, and his experience, his leadership in the dressing room, he's almost now I think probably is actually the seamer who you drop last anywhere in the world.
I always think he plays better when Anderson's not playing as well.
Possibly we notice him more.
Yeah, that's not like a reflection on him and Anderson as a pair. As a pair, they're incredible. But I just think Broad shines through more. If you think in the Ashes last year, he stood up, and when there was no Anderson, he was literally 4 overs in, and there was no Anderson, and Broad stood up and was incredible. England's leading wicket taker. The last test, he was incredible. All right, didn't get as many wickets as he did in this test, but I just think he's brilliant in the 2015 Ashes when he got that 8 for. At Trent Bridge again. No Anderson and Broad stood up.
Well, when England were in the West Indies in 2019, he bowled one of the best wicketless spells I've ever seen in Antigua. He's been absolutely superb and he's also moved away from being one of those. People always used to say about Stuart Broad, he's a bowler of great spells rather than a great bowler. That's not true anymore. He's got that. He's a little bit like Morne Morkel did late in his career, or Ishant Sharma's developed. He's developed that ability to bowl 6 inches fuller. And at his height, with the amount of movement he gets with the variable bounce he can generate on any wicket, Morne Morkel was lethal for the last year and a half, 2 years of his Test career, and Broad's in exactly the same place now.
The thing with Broad is now he's willing to get driven as well. Like a few years ago, if he'd bowled a drive ball, he would have dragged his length. Even if that might have resulted in a wicket later on, he would have dragged his length back. But now he's fine to go for 2 boundaries, maybe a streaky edge for 4. If it results in a wicket, and I think that shows a lot of maturity, and that just shows how much his game has developed.
Nakul, you mentioned this. That's a very good line you just mentioned there about Broad being, well, people have said that he's a bowler of great spells as opposed to being a great bowler. Now, I always feel like if you look at the 500 club now, which obviously he's part of, we've got McGrath, Walsh, Jimmy, and him. I've always felt like Stuart Broad hasn't received the credit he deserves on the international stage, and I think people equate Courtney Walsh, Glenn McGrath in particular, with greatness. Fantastic, some of the world's best bowlers the game's ever seen. Stuart Broad obviously is probably going to surpass Courtney Walsh for sure. He's only 18 wickets away. Do you feel like he's not received his due credit over the years, Nakul, or do you feel like he's always been kind of respected as he should have been for his ability that he's always had?
No, I would kind of agree with Joe in the fact that he comes as a package with Anderson, kind of in a sense, kind of mitigates against him. I also wonder if like we don't appreciate either Ambrose or Walsh enough because they come as a package, or we don't appreciate how good Waqar Younis was because of Wasim Akram. And it's a little bit like that when players come as a package like that, but yeah, I don't think that Broad does. I don't think Broad's standing quite reflects how good he is and how skillful he is and how willing he is to learn. Even now, relatively late into his career, it would be very easy for him to say, I've got whatever it was at the time, 350, 400 Test wickets. What more can I learn? But no, he's so hungry for learning and so hungry for getting better, and he's willing to go and have chats with Peter Moores and have chats with bowlers around the world and bowling coaches and say, right, how can I get better? He was working with Darren Gough over the winter on how to bowl in Sri Lanka on pitches that weren't going to aid swing. It's bowling cutters. He bowls that split singer delivery, that sort of wobble seam delivery. His leg cutter is a thing of beauty now, and he's adding that little bit of craft to it all the time. I think of him. He almost operates it like Dan. You were talking about being a spinner. He almost operates a little bit like a spinner in that he's constantly looking for those little tweaks and those little tiny subtle variations off the basis of a very groove rhythmical run up and action. And he's now got to the point where he can land the ball on the same spot 6 times in a row, and even he doesn't know which way the ball's going to move. What chance does the batter have? It's going to take him to have been retired a couple of years, unless he sort of has an Anderson-like sort of sprint through the last few years of his career when Anderson retires. He might be one of those bowlers who it takes a couple of years to think, bloody hell, that guy was good.
I think they'll only realise how good Jimmy and Broad were when there's no Jimmy and Broad.
I think it was Nasser who was saying that.
Yeah, when it's Jofra and Curran taking the new ball, or Jofra and Wokes, for example, and all of a sudden Jimmy and
it's pretty handy having Jofra and Wokes taking the new ball, but you don't replace 1,100 wickets easily.
Easily, yeah. You've obviously admired Broad from afar, Dan. Obviously, you've been the brunt end of a couple of devastating spells in South Africa over the last 5 years, as you know. But what is the kind of viewpoint from the South African cricketing public on Stuart Broad?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's what can you say about someone with 500 Test wickets? It was absolutely criminal to drop him. I don't even know how that discussion. I don't know how that was a discussion amongst selectors. It's like, are we going to play Wood or Broad? How did we arrive at that point? How do you? It's absurd. But like I said, what I love in a fast bowler is how destructive they can be, And in my opinion, Broad is far more destructive than James Anderson. I would argue James Anderson is the more skillful bowler. He can take it both ways at will, and he's played until he's 38 and whatnot. But in terms of who could rip through a top 6 in a single spell, Broad is one of those guys. Dale Stein's one of them. Broad is one of them. Glenn McGrath's one of them, and the Windies great's one of them. There are very few bowlers in the world who are as destructive as these guys. And that's actually what you talk about in 20 years. You don't talk about line and length and consistency. You talk about his 8 for 15. You talk about Dale Stein's 7 for whatever in Nagpur. These are the spells that make you who you are as a fast bowler. Obviously highly rated, like 500 wickets. It's always going to be difficult to stick out in a side that has Jimmy Anderson in it. How do you stand out against or next to a guy who's taken 589 wickets? It's close to impossible.
Do you feel? Just say quickly, guys.
For 4 years.
I was going to say, do you feel like Broad's usurped Anderson as England's #1 bowler?
Not right now. I would much rather South Africa face Jimmy Anderson than Stuart Broad. That's for sure. I think any top 6 in the world would much rather take on Jimmy Anderson right now than Stuart Broad.
Are you referring? Sorry, Jay. Are you referring there to ever or currently?
I'm saying if you go to name your 4 fast bowlers, say 3 fast bowlers and your spinner as your bowling attack for the next Test match, is Stuart Broad number 1 or is Jim Anderson number 1? If everyone's fit for Stuart Broad, Nakul, you agree?
Well, both of them are definitely going to play in the first Test. So,
but who's the most important in cricket team right now? Is it Stuart Broad or Jimmy Anderson? Who do we think?
I think if only because Anderson is 4 years older and you have to be a little bit more selective with when you play him. And Anderson is slightly more receptive now to, I think he said actually during the third Test, he wasn't happy about being left out of the second Test because he had a stiff back. And, a few years ago, he would have pushed himself forward and said, I'm playing. But he actually said, no, this was probably the smart thing to do, not play in this Test match. If only because of that, Stuart Broad. But while Anderson is still playing and still taking wickets, because he will, because it's James Anderson, wickets happen to James Anderson when he's bowling these days. He's always going to be number 1 while he's still playing. But I think now probably that Anderson is more likely to be rotated if it's a choice between the two of them, as we will see later in this summer. Somehow you've got to fit. I'm not a fan of going into a Test match without a spinner. I know Dom Best didn't bowl a single over, but I think this is like the first time or the second time since 2015 England haven't bowled a single over of spin. But I'm not a fan of going into a Test match without a specialist spinner. So somehow you've got to fit Broad, Anderson, Archer, and Wokes into the same 11 in some capacity. Crawley's going to come back in because Stokes will be able to bowl, so you've got Stokes as well. And there'll have to be a certain amount of whichever. England are in a great position now that a little bit like India are, or like Australia were last year, or South Africa were in patches when Kyle Abbott and Dwanel Lafir were still knocking around, where a really good bowler is going to be left out, or 2 really good bowlers are going to be left out of every single Test.
Which actually is a great segue into the next point I want to discuss with you guys. So I think I mentioned actually after the first Test that the series I think could be decided on the basis of the bench strength of England. I felt England was still going to win the series because they had a better quality replacements at their disposal. Now, I believe that England used 15 players across the 3 Test matches. West Indies obviously only used 12, with Coleman coming for the third Test match. I go back to kind of after we head to the third innings. Obviously, West Indies have got a deficit there, I think 170 odd. Do you think at that point, when they go back into the field there, that they've kind of not given up, but they've kind of become very wary? They seem quite wary, I felt, in that third innings when England come out to bat. They seem quite tired. They seem a bit more laboured. Were they possibly had half a brain back on the beaches in the West Indies, or do you still feel they had a lot of fight in them going into that third innings? Joe, what was your thoughts?
Well, I think they were probably mentally drained. They've been, I think it was Nakul who said at the start, they've been in this bubble for
like June. 23rd June.
Literally, for like 4.5 weeks. It's crazy. I think they were probably just mentally drained, and for me, they should have rotated the squad a little bit more. I don't think Gabriel should have played this Test, not because he's not good enough, just because his body probably didn't seem to be able to take it. I mean, he literally went off with an injury, straight away, virtually like an hour into the first morning, half an hour, whatever. So I think they were probably just mentally drained more than anything, and they probably are a little bit like, Holmes. They've literally had no contact with the outside world, in real life, for 4 weeks. They've literally been stuck in one hotel in Old Trafford, then one in Hampshire, and then back to Old Trafford, and that's as far as they've got. And I bet they're probably just mentally drained. For me, that's not a criticism. I'm sure that anyone would get like that. You could be the best athlete in the world, you could be anybody, but I'm sure you would get like that if you were in that kind of environment. I
think Jason Holder alludes to that fact yesterday in the post-match interview. He was saying that they opened the curtains, they saw the ground again. Just it was quite obviously it was quite taxing on the mind to be stuck there for so long.
Yeah,
and I think could have contributed obviously to performance possibly in the second half of the match. Dan, what did you think? I mean, did it have an effect, or was it simply a case of England just being too good?
Yeah, no, absolutely it did. I think Joe's hit the nail on the head there. But I think also there really is nothing more demoralizing than being on top of a side. I would say West Indies were on top of England for the sort of first half of that inning, and then to have a tail ender come in and just knock the shit out of your bowling attack, like Stuart Broad did. You just absolutely there really is nothing more demoralizing than that in Test cricket. And I think they didn't actually recover from that. It was 1-1 in the series. They were on top in the final game. They would have been on top of the world, 120 for 4. It's just, Pope and Butler. We just have to get through these two, and then we'll run through the bowlers, and we're well on our way to win this game. And then a day later, they have a deficit of 100, 170 odd, whatever it was. And I don't think you can really come back from that. How do you take the field with a deficit of 170 when you should have bowled the English out for 200? How do you carry on playing? So obviously there's the physical taxation of playing 3 Test matches in such close proximity with no subs. They don't have 3 seamers that they can rotate like England do. If they rotated their seamers, then Holder or is it Chima Holder would have had to come in, and that just speaks to the depth of the West Indian cricket at the moment compared to England. England probably could have sent 2 Test sides there, to be completely honest. But I mean, they held their own. They're not the strongest side. They haven't got the strongest local cricket. They lose a lot of players to Kolpak cricket. They're obviously a very T20 focused cricketing nation, and they've gone to England and they've won a Test match. They've won a Test match. Granted, it wasn't England's strongest side, and they didn't necessarily play particularly well to win the Test match. But how many countries could go to England now and win a Test match? South Africa definitely couldn't.
Not for a while, anyway. That's in 2012.
Not for a while.
Nakul, you mentioned before that you felt that the batsmen were very much at ease in that third innings. Obviously, Sibley and Birds both made runs. Root came in and scored very quickly, set up the declaration. Do you think at that point, you obviously saw the game a lot more closely? Well, certainly more than me anyway. You pretty much watched every ball. Did you see the body language of the West Indian players? Did it seem indicative of players who kind of given up? They were waiting for the end of the match, or was there still a lot of fight in there? They felt they could maybe get something out of the match.
I didn't see a lack of desire or a lack of fight at any point from the West Indies during this series. Jason Holder is not a guy to allow that to happen. Phil Simmons is not a guy to allow that to happen. But Joe said it. Like, there comes a point, and Dan said it, there comes a point where you just can't anymore. Like, this is the second Test in a row that they've had England in a position where they think, right, we're in this game on the first innings. But then England pull away in the first innings at the second Test after Sibley has worn them down, and then Ben Stokes smashes them around to all parts on that morning. They finally find themselves conceding 470. The top certainly 3 are not in a position to give the bowlers any rest at all. And again, it's the middle order having to drag them out of a hole, and no middle order can keep doing that, no matter how good they are. And Jason Holder is a very good player. Shane Dowrich is a much better player than he showed in this series. Jermaine Blackwood's done really well. Roston Chase is a really admirable cricketer. But you cannot keep digging yourself out of a hole time and time and time again and expect it to work. At some point, that is going to catch up with you. Your bowlers haven't had any rest. England are suddenly ahead of the Test match and can play the game at exactly the pace they want to. They accelerate when they want to. They decelerate when they want to. The second Test, they're in a position to smash the bowlers here, there, and everywhere. Suddenly, you're running into Ben Stokes playing probably. I mean, that's a better T20 innings than Ben Stokes has ever played. Frankly, let's be honest. And then for that to happen twice in a row, when you've been away from your family for 5 months, you've come to a COVID pandemic black spot. There just comes a point where you just don't have anything in the tank, and we see this on tours all the time. Usually longer tours than this, but I don't see any lack of fight or any lack of body language or anything. I think body language is pretty overrated in general, in truth. But and eventually, the fact that England are a better Test team with a better Test batting lineup and a greater depth of players and significantly more resources to call upon, told. But the West Indies did remarkable work coming over to England in the first place, and really did compete properly hard. And I'm trying not to be patronizing here and trying not to sound patronizing, and I have no intention of being so. But this West Indies team is on the up. There is something to work with. There is a lot of depth of players they didn't call. I thought Aljari Joseph probably should have. If you're going with, if you're going with not rotating the whole bowling attack, I think Joseph should have played ahead of Gabriel in the third test. I think, Joe, you're right there. Shamar Hold is a really exciting fast bowler who's got wickets at good batters at A-team level. And there's good depth there behind that. Raymond Reefer, we didn't see at all during this series. And the West Indies have now, they've also got Darren Bravo and Shimron Hetmeyer waiting to come back into the team at some point soon. So there are huge signs of progress and they're led by Jason Holder, who is just phenomenal as a man, as a captain, as a leader, as a bowler. But just in the end, the fact that England, though over a long test series, those little differences get those cracks get wider and wider and wider and wider. And just Dan said it exactly right. At a certain point, West Indies just had nothing left in the tank.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you said that. I think you're absolutely right, and I think you banged on the money, to be honest. Knuckle with that. I think Phil Simmons and Jason Holder want to permit any kind of lack of desire, lack of fight, even on that final day. They would try. I do agree with that. I think the leadership of Jason Holder, it's quite widely acknowledged, has been extremely good and extremely strong in very difficult circumstances. Let's be fair. He's had to do an unprecedented job here of leading that team, and an inexperienced team. Not maybe the strongest team at the moment. I appreciate you saying Knuckle in terms of improving, but the reality is that they're a middling side, aren't they? Let's be fair. They're a middling team that will produce middling results at the moment. So yeah. I think we'll wrap it up there, guys, to be honest with you. I think it's a good place to kind of finish at the end of the test match. I want to just quickly touch upon, Darren, I know you have to go in a few minutes, but I want to quickly touch upon the England squad and how it's shaping up for the Pakistan test series. Before we'll go to obviously the next part, just quickly about the comments that Jason Holder made, but I just want to finish off with the cricket element of things. If we go to you, Joe, obviously, England announced an unchanged squad for the test series starting next week. Would you agree with that? Would you have made any kind of maybe one or two changes, maybe additions to the squad? Obviously, Joe Delhi's left. Obviously, he's gone to the white ball squad. But
we touched upon it a little bit before about Josh Butler probably going to the white ball squad. I think everyone said that, and I definitely agree. I won't go into all that again, but I think he shouldn't be in the squad, not because he's not a good test cricketer, but I definitely think if he goes to the one day side, finds some form there, maybe then comes back into the test fold. Obviously different formats, that's a whole different issue, but I think I'm surprised he's there. Well, not necessarily surprised, but I'm not disappointed either. I can't quite find the right word, but yeah, I don't necessarily agree with him being there. But other than that, I'm not that surprised. I just don't think you should change a winning formula, really. I don't think Ben Foakes is actually in it, is he?
Ben Foakes is in the reserves.
Yeah, so Ben Foakes should be in.
They've named 4 reserves. So it's Dan Lawrence, Ben Foakes, James Bracey, and Jack Leach.
Yeah, so I think Ben Foakes should be in the squad, personally. I know obviously the reserves, they can be brought in, but Dan Lawrence as well, you could argue, could be in ahead of Crawley, but Crawley is probably got his place there for a while. I do like Crawley, but I really, really rate Lawrence, and he offers something with the ball as well. If you decide not to play Bess, which again is a discussion for another day, but yeah, overall I'm not so surprised about the squad that they picked.
Do you think it'll be a more difficult test assignment for them compared to the West Indies series? Do you think it'll be more competitive?
I think it'll be different. I think obviously Pakistan have played the same amount of cricket West Indies have when they first arrived. Yeah. England have obviously off the back of 3 tests and like 1 warm-up match as well. And I think it's going to be a little bit different. I do think England will be England will just go straight into the next test, basically. They won't think too. Obviously, they'll think a little bit about the difference in opponents, and they'll obviously go about the normal procedure of analysing and everything like that. But I just think purely based on the amount of cricket that they've had, England will find this test easier than Pakistan will.
How about you, Dan? How do you think that England will fare in this Test series coming up? Obviously, they're on a high. They come back from one deficit. They've won the series. Joe Root's won his last 5 Tests as captain. Do you feel that they will turn over Pakistan? They obviously the last 2 series they've drew, haven't they? In 2016, 2018. But how do you think they can get the win this time? Or
yeah, I foresee it being a very one-sided series, to be completely honest.
Okay, all right.
I think the English seamers will walk through the Pakistan batsmen, obviously with the exception of Babar Azam. He'll obviously put up a bit more, but I just can't see the Pakistanis offering much resistance with the bat. Having said that, though, I do think their seam attack poses more of a threat than the West Indies seam attack. I think Afridi and they'll probably go with
Mohammad Abbas.
Abbas. I think they could in those English conditions, and we saw the ball move around plenty in this series. They could offer more of a contest for the likes of Sibley, Burns, Crawley, Roots.
Very suited to these conditions.
Yeah, I think these seamers they'll offer a proper test to the English batsmen. But even if England were to get rolled for 220, they'll always be in the game with those 4 seamers that they have. So yeah, one-sided event for me, unfortunately.
Nakul, what do you think? You concur with Dan, or is it going to be a competitive series?
I'd be a lot more optimistic about Pakistan's prospect with the bat. I mean, with the ball, Mohammad Abbas. Joe alluded to it there. Mohammad Abbas's record everywhere is remarkable. But you almost couldn't construct a bowler better suited to English conditions. Yeah. He bowls just that little half stump closer to sort of closer to the back. He targets the inside of off stump rather than the outside of off stump, and he's incredibly accurate and can bowl all day. I think he's got nearly 100 first-class wickets in England under around 20. So that's a combination of his test stats, which he was superb on the 2 Test tour last time, and then for Leicestershire over a couple of seasons. Shaheen Shah Afridi is a rising star for sure. Big, tall left armer, kind of Mitchell Stark, but a little bit less erratic in Test cricket, and has a really good sharp bouncer. Naseem Shah, who 16-year-old, has just taken a Test hat trick. And then you've got guys kind of knocking around the Sohail Khan, who's done pretty well in England before, admittedly, kind of doesn't necessarily have the fitness to back it up in the second and third spells and in the second innings. Usman Khan Shinwari, Imran Khan, who's quite a interesting prospect, and Wahab Riaz, who's always fun. Not always effective, but always fun. Where West Indies where Pakistan do have an advantage is you've got Yasir Shah, a genuinely world-class spin bowler. We've seen Yasir did very well in the tour in 2016, particularly at Lords in the Oval, and we've seen what Nathan Lyon's done here over the last couple of tours. And Yasir Shah is a very different prospect to Roston Chase or Rakeem Cornwall. And then with the batting, honestly, I think it's a good sign when you can name basically the entire 11 for a team, and you can pretty much do that with Pakistan. I think the only spot open is at 6, where maybe it's Fawad Alam or maybe it's somebody else. But you've got Abid Ali's made a great start to his Test career. Shan Masood is a very different player. He was James Anderson's bunny a couple of tours ago, but he's a slightly different player. And you've got Azhar Ali, Babar Azam, and Asad Shafiq, all of whom are very, very classy players, very good players. And Rizwan is a massive improvement, certainly over the last couple of years of Sarfraz as a number 7. So I would go 2-1 England, just because of familiarity with home conditions and just how good this English seam attack is. But I think it's going to be a good series. I'm looking forward to it greatly.
Do you think England this time will start the series in a better manner than they have in the last 2 series, last 3 series, including New Zealand?
I mean, they're not going to drop Broad for the first Test of the series, so that's
you like to think no.
But yeah, no, I think Joe's point about them being sort of match ready and match warmed up, you may see them start to flag a little bit towards the end of the series, perhaps more so than Pakistan. But I think England will be almost at peak when it comes to that first Test match. The players are going home for a couple of days just to see their families, just to sleep in their own beds, to see something other than the outfield of a cricket ground for something, go for a walk or something, probably not go have a coffee actually, because probably limited in what you can do, but and then go back into the bubble, just that little bit of mental refreshment. Picking that, I honestly can't decide on what that England team attack is going to be, and I think that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this England-Pakistan series.
Fantastic. Okay, so that wraps up, guys, the breakdown of this third and final test match between England and the West Indies. I just wanted to go in, obviously, to the next part. Dan, I need to shoot in a few minutes, but I'd like to get your opinion on this. We mentioned, kind of impromptu, we're going to discuss Jason Holder's comments yesterday, the post-match interview about the current pandemic that's going on, obviously, and how it's affecting the smaller nations. I'll actually start with you, if you don't mind, Nakul, and then bring you, Dan, in on this from a SA perspective. What did you think of Holder's comments yesterday? Do you feel like maybe England should kind of reciprocate the goodwill that West Indies have shown by coming over with a tour later in the year?
There's got to be something concrete. This can't be another situation where we all go out onto the street and clap our hands nicely and bang pots and pans together for the NHS and then keep supporting the government who defunded them in the first place. This can't be allowed to happen. Jason Holder, I love the fact that Jason Holder is a genuine advocate. I love the fact that he is willing to speak, and he is you can see in his eyes almost the quiet confidence and the clarity of thought, and the fact that he really thinks through these issues. So we've seen a lot of captains say we need more support, we need more help. He's come up with a concrete example. It shouldn't have to be Jason Holder, by the way, coming up with concrete examples, but he is. So a reciprocal tour is one thing, but I love his idea of splitting the broadcast revenue between home and away boards. I would much rather actually that World Cricket started pooling for broadcast revenues, and a little bit like the Premier League, where individual Premier League clubs don't sort out their own TV contracts. It's done collectively, and that makes the whole competition stronger. La Liga in Spain does exactly the same thing now after a long years when it was individual, and the competition's better for it. Yeah. So finding a way to spread the wealth around, and unfortunately, cricket, as much as any other sport, and in fact more than other sports, because of how lopsided it is, and because of how equipment and training heavy cricket is, even at the top level, is reliant on simple funds. It's unfortunate that we have to talk in bold monetary terms, but I love Jason Holder speaking out like that, and I think that's a very sensible suggestion. I think it was last year, Jason Holder said something that actually we on Guerilla Cricket have been talking about a few times, is that the ICC to have a fund for kind of funding minimum central contracts for every board, so everyone is at a certain level, and that means that players don't have to make certain decisions, and Dan in South Africa will know more about that than most in terms of players having to make decisions that they might not otherwise want to make.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, it's sad to see. It's sad to see the captain of a Test side having to ask a nation to come tour them, or to come up with ways to keep cricket alive. And if we stick with the current model, what we're going to see in 10, 20 years is Test cricket being a luxury for 3 or 4 nations.
It may be even faster with COVID.
Absolutely, and there's obviously a lot of similarities you can draw between South Africa and West Indies. We all lose a lot of players for financial reasons, and you can never blame the players. It's their jobs. They have wives and kids to look after. You can't blame them for making financially sound decisions. West Indies have obviously lost the likes of Chris Gale, Fidel Edwards, Jerome Taylor, Pollard, Russell. These kind of guys haven't been available for the national side because they've had to earn an income.
I believe Kimo Paul didn't obviously tour because he's the only person earning in his family. He's basically the breadwinner, which is the main reason why he didn't tour.
Absolutely, and if he accepts a county contract, you can't say like, he's so unpatriotic. How can you do that? Nonsense.
Kimo Paul, I believe, turned down a county Kolpak contract.
I mean,
not before the start. So Miguel Cummins took one last year. Middlesex. I mean, obviously Kolpak is now gone, and now it's 2 overseas players in the championship. So I think the situation is a little bit different now, and probably better internationally.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, your morals don't keep you warm at night, right? So this is going to keep happening. What needs to happen, and something you and I actually spoke about recently, is now that these Kolpak contracts are gone, right, you're going to have this increase in the number of overseas pros per county side, which theoretically would make them eligible for international selection, right? we could start seeing a lot of South African players, West Indian players, or Kolpak players going to these places to earn their money, but still being able to represent their national side. I think that has the ability to then improve the quality of the cricket that South Africa are playing, that West Indies are playing, which in turn, attracts crowds. South Africa, any sports fan will know that the moment your team starts losing, they lose support. West Indies have been on a decline since the 80s. They've never been able to replicate that sort of level of cricket. In South Africa in the exact same boat. We're at an earlier stage. We dominated for a while, and we're on our decline now. There's no reason we can't be West Indies in another 10 years. There's no reason we. Luckily, we were still able to sell out stadiums when England came, but I don't think we're far away from not being able to do that. I think it's just around the corner. We've just been whitewashed by Sri Lanka home and away, and we've just lost to England as well. A couple more series like that, and we're another West Indies. Our players will start jumping ship. Our fans will stop watching. This is even without taking the pandemic and lockdown into account. It really is looking grim for countries like South Africa and West Indies. And it's not great to see. Like I said, something has to happen, or Test cricket becomes a luxury for a handful of nations.
There's the problem, isn't it, though? This constant talk of the big three, and the fact that the revenue shares and splits. I mean, do you feel, Joe, ICC should intervene a bit more here, and there should be more of an equal division of the revenues that are generated from the game to assist countries like West Indies and South Africa? Yeah,
definitely. Like Nakul said about the TV revenue and stuff like that should be. I definitely think that should be split between West Indies and England. Say, just for example, for this series, or South Africa, England for when we toured there, and that's just even when we. I can't remember who it was. New Zealand was scheduled to play Scotland and Netherlands randomly,
and Ireland.
And Ireland, yeah, they were scheduled to play them in like one off ODI and one off T20. And if you think New Zealand aren't technically classed in the big three, but they're a bigger cricketing nation than all those three countries, and think financially how, of course, that's going to have an impact forget the pandemic for a second. If that was to have gone ahead, gate money and things like that would have had an impact. But I actually think New Zealand probably would have got a lot of that money. And I just wonder how the ICC would have supported, the Netherlands and Scotland, for example, and Ireland in times like that, because that's addressed.
In theory, at the moment, it's meant to be that the home board get the broadcasting revenue because they're the rights holder. What Jason Holder was calling for was for a split of away, so that the away touring team gets a split of the revenue. But I think it needs to go further than that. I understand that Jason Holder is calling for what he thinks might actually be feasible. But cricket has this. Cricket doesn't. The ICC isn't a governing body. Cricket doesn't have a central governing body, and it never has had. FIFA, for all of its problems, is a central governing body, and they get richer by growing the game and opening it up to more markets. And so that element of self-interest and the game being a proper global game and a properly globally competitive game, and it's the same with rugby, which has grown the game significantly. Like Japan are now a genuinely competitive rugby nation when they weren't a few years ago. It's not just Argentina have managed to maintain being a competitive rugby nation for a long time now. We've seen growth with the Pacific Islanders nations are able to hold on to their players better than they were able to 10, 20 years ago. And that's not an accident. That's been done on purpose because somebody has realized that actually the way to grow the game sustainably is quite literally to grow the game and to bring it out. Cricket is not in that situation. It's basically India just came in and took where Australia and England were sitting in the days when the ICC used to be called the Imperial Cricket Conference. Let's just start with that. Once you get that point, you don't need to. Everything else suddenly makes more sense. It's like a country becoming independent of a colonial power, and then whoever comes in obviously just takes over the existing structure, and that takes a long time to break down, and it takes a lot of effort to break down. That hasn't happened in cricket, and so we're in a situation where the big three get richer by holding on to political and financial control. And so that's what they're going to do. And we can, there are things that can be done around the edges, and there are ways that it can be made a bit better, and we can have more tournaments and more bigger ICC tournaments so that the wealth gets spread around a bit more. But there's a central point there's a central structural point that has to be dismantled before anything meaningful can happen. I have no idea how you go about making that happen, but that is a fundamental thing that I think people have to understand.
I can sense a part two from this, just in the last 5 minutes. We can certainly delve into a lot more, but guys, and I know Dan, obviously you're an hour ahead as well, mate. So just to wrap up from your side, is there anything you want to add quickly, Dan, before you shoot off, or on this note?
Nothing specific. I'm just glad to have Test cricket back. Hopefully, we'll have a very competitive series with the English and Pakistan. I can't see it happening though, but I would like to see it. I'll be supporting the underdogs, unfortunately. So,
is that England or Pakistan?
Look for some triggering tweets from me. But other than that, it's always nice talking to you guys. I'm definitely keen for a part 2 as well.
Fantastic. No, Dan, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure I'll catch up with you probably next week. We're back on here. So go well, and speak to you soon.
Cheers, mate.
Brilliant. Cheers, Dan. Thanks, mate.
Bye, Dan.
Okay, and then there were 3. Okay, so Joe and Nakul, we're going to talk now just about the ODI series, which starts tomorrow between England and Ireland. 3 ODIs starting tomorrow, Saturday, and next Tuesday. Obviously, Joe and I, we had chatted a bit on Monday, I believe it was, about this. Kind of our thoughts on the series. I'll go to you, Nakul, because I've said me and Joe had a chat about it. What was your thoughts on the ICC bringing this Super League concept for World Cup qualification?
Yeah, the World Cup Super League, again, you're fun. A little bit like the World Test Championship. It's a good but a partial attempt to bring some more structure and a little bit more equity and equality to matters. But obviously, you're working within a slightly flawed system. Particularly at the end of it, a 10-team World Cup, which continues to be a nonsense. As good as the last World Cup was, it was not because of the format; it was despite it. But yeah, I think the World Cup Super League, in terms of it brings guaranteed opportunities for teams to play most, not all, of the other nations in the world, and a lot of that will shake down to nations getting a chance to play consistently, not just in one-off stuff that is shoved in between series where players are knackered and no one's watching and it gets written off and the media can just ignore it. But in a structured way that actually has something at the end of it against nations whom playing will improve. Like England are playing Ireland in a 3 one-day international series. They played a few one-off games, but this is the first time England have played a multilateral series against Ireland for a while. They're playing the Netherlands in a 3-test series next year. Again, England have famously played the Netherlands a couple of times in World T20s, but not on a serious and structured level. And Afghanistan will get more exposure to teams outside of the Asian subcontinent. Afghanistan it was quite interesting looking at the World Cup, actually. Afghanistan did really well against teams they've played a lot before. Against India, against Pakistan, against Sri Lanka, against Bangladesh. All of those games were really close games, but they got blown away against teams they're not so familiar with. So that can only help. It can only help the competitiveness of the middle to lower end of international cricket. Also, I'm generally a fan. I think 3 one-day internationals is about right for a bilateral series. I wouldn't be averse to going back to tri-series, actually. I used to quite enjoy those, and I think it's a good way to get both touring teams involved. But no, I think it's a start, and I think it's a good start. I thought Sky were unusually sniffy about the concept when they were talking about Michael Atherton. It's not like Michael Atherton to be dismissive of something like this, but I think he was, which is unfortunate. But I think it'll be interesting, and I think we should take it seriously, and like we like we are trying to do with the World Test Championship.
Joe, I mean, obviously heading to the series now, obviously, as we said before, it's got a lot more meaning context now to these 3 matches. What was your thoughts on the squad that England have announced? The final 14.
Yeah,
I know you mentioned Joe Denley. You've been quite vocal about that.
Yeah.
I agree with you that we should he shouldn't have jettisoned into the squad. But that aside, are you happy with the selections that have been made? I mean, no Sam Hain,
Yeah, no,
for example, Henry Brooks.
Not entirely, to be honest. I mean, I'll briefly mention that Denley definitely shouldn't be even in the.
Let's get in there, didn't you?
Agreed. He's the only real head scratcher in the squad.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's the only other person who should be in that squad is Sam Hain. I can't get my head around why he's not
in the squad or the reserve list.
Well, you can argue the squad, but I could understand why he's in the reserve list. If they want someone like for like with Denley, then they could put Livingston in the squad. If they want, a part-time bowler with a batter, and then put Hain into the reserve. But if Hain was in the squad, I wouldn't have a problem with that either. Personally, I love Livingston, being a Lancashire fan, one of my favourite players. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I can't get my head around why Hain isn't in it. I think Salt was unlucky to miss out.
I think 100 obviously in that one game.
England aren't short of openers.
Yeah,
true. And then I also think Laurie Evans was unlucky to miss out. I think he's a really good player. So in that middle order, steadying the ship, a bit like Pope in Test cricket, sort of what I was talking about a little bit earlier. I think Laurie Evans is a really, really good player, and I'm sure he'll get his chance in a squad one day. I'm surprised it wasn't in this squad.
Yeah, and with all of these guys, Livingston and Hain less so, but Livingston and Laurie Evans and Phil Salt have a lot of experience of franchise cricket around the world, and that's something that Owen Morgan. Yeah. That's something that Owen Morgan has really pushed for over the last couple of years, for players to try and play the IPL, to play the CPL, to play the Bangladesh Premier League, to play the PSL, and all of these
as well.
And all of and these guys have done to build that experience base. I completely agree with Denley. I think I don't quite see the rationale. You could say the same to a lesser extent with James Vince. I mean, obviously James Vince is a phenomenal player when he's playing at his best, but that's it. He's neither a regular nor is he an up and comer. Like he's just going to be shunted straight out when Root and Butler and Stokes are available. He seems a little bit, but he's a good player, and it'll be good for England to see him, and for England fans to see him perform really well. He's got a really good list day record for Hampshire. Sam Hain would be. He doesn't score particularly quickly, but Sam Hain could be a semi replacement for Joe Root in terms of his consistent. Just batting at number 3 in terms of his consistency. Has the highest list day average in the world ever. That surely can't be ignored for too much longer. As far as the bowlers, I'm really happy to see Reece Topley back. Yeah,
I really rate Reece Topley. I think he's quite an underrated player. Obviously, sort of went disappeared a little bit really since the 2016 World T20.
He got dropped part with you. He got hit around by AB de Villiers, which can happen to anyone. And then obviously he's had 5 stress fractures, and he's only 25. And he injured it. I think he's only 25. He's still ridiculously young for a guy who's played a lot of international, and not a lot of international, but a lot of cricket. But he's had 5 stress fractures. He's done his shoulder. He's done his hand, and it's great to see him back. And not just the fact that he's a left armer, and obviously have 2 left armers with David Willys coming back into the squad, but Reece Topley's huge. He's 6'6", 6'7". He's got that Yorker coming down from a great height. He can swing the ball. He's got a slow ball, and he's. And
he reminds you of Berendorf a little bit, but just a Berendorf.
Little bit, yeah. I think Berendorf is a bit more kind of hit the deck back of a length than Reece Topley is. Although he does have that very good in swinging Yorker, as James Vince found out in the World Cup. And a few others. But a little bit like he's kind of a left arm version of Billy Stanlake. That's the one that bringing the ball maybe down from a height. But he's quick enough. And then David Willey. I think England have not got the best out of David Willey as a white ball player. It's a shame actually that he's not going to bat higher than 7, because I'm not a Yorkshire fan and diehard, but I'm from Yorkshire, and David Willey has only ever scored runs for Yorkshire or Northants at the top of the order or at 3. But David Willey can score you 100 in
that 100.
What was the T20? What was it? The T20 final against? Sorry, was it 2016? The final match for Northants, 2015, when he scored.
I'm not sure he scored 100 in the finals day, but
it wasn't 100. It was
quarter final for Northants. I think it was 2013, the year they won it.
He played a match where he knocked in against Surrey in that T20 final.
Yeah, and he helped Yorkshire get to finals day in 2016, I think.
2015.
Just smashing the balls. That finals day where Mark Wood made Joe Root and Johnny Bairstow look like school kids. A few years ago, yeah. But yeah, David Willey is a really destructive player, but he does take a little bit of time to get in. But he's done a lot of work in the off season, apparently, in terms of trying to get the new ball to swing for longer and making him more effective in white ball stuff. And as far as the rest of the team, look, given that England don't have Joe Root, Joss Buttler, Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer, Mark Wood available to them for test bubble reasons. Chris Jordan's injured. He'd be leading this attack if he was fit, but he's just had surgery. Darwin Milan is injured. Pat Brown is injured. Given that, it's still a pretty strong team. Like, England's white ball depth is kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah, those 6 plus the 3 you mentioned.
Parkinson's injured as well, but England still have Moeen Ali and Adil Rashid. And like Liam Dawson won't let anyone down, and he's another one who's done well in T20 competitions around the world.
High up as well. You could easily bat Liam Dawson 5 or 6, I would say.
Well, you could bat Moeen at sort of 5, 6. Him and Moeen at 5, 6, 7.
I would give it a chance. I know he had a chance at the top of the order in 2015, but I would love to see Moeen maybe about 3.
I can't see that happening.
I can't see it happening, but I would love to
particularly given that how some stats that came out. I really want access to the CricViz database so I can work all this stuff out myself. But Moeen Ali is the best death overs, the best hitter of spin in T20 cricket around the world. So him coming in at 5 and 6, and Moeen Ali has scored 50 ball hundreds batting at 6 for England. Batting behind Roy and Bairstow, you've got Owen Morgan still in the squad. It's a big series for Sam Billings to try and.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I won't say he's lucky. Obviously, had a great year last year for Kent, but I would say that he needs to perform after. He was dropped. Was it New Zealand series that he played? He didn't do very well, did he, in the New Zealand series? And he was dropped for South Africa.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, he's got a lot of talent, a lot of ability. He's you could call him a 360 player. I just feel like he hasn't just performed on the international stage, and I think
he'll probably get to keep in this series.
Yes, he will. Yeah, definitely he will. Yeah, I don't think Banton will be keep. I think it'll be. Billings,
we haven't even mentioned Tom Banton, who has shown flashes of what he's capable of for England, but he's very young in his international career. I would like to see Tom Banton bat 3 personally.
I was going to say, where would you bat him? I don't like him at 6, Tom Banton. Would you guys bat him?
I'd bat him at 3.
I can understand why he bats 6, though. I can understand their logic of if England are, 250 for 4, and he comes in at 6 with, maybe not 250, but 200 for 4, and he comes in at 6 with 20 overs left. I can understand that. But Shay, you made a point on my podcast about how he's better against a hard ball. And I think the same can be said for Moeen Ali as well. Especially in T20 cricket, the ball doesn't really get soft as it does in 50-over cricket.
For Worcestershire, he bats top 4, doesn't he? So, and he's obviously performed very well there. So I just don't know if he's able to replicate kind of form at international level.
But in the PSL and the BPL, he bats in the middle order. Coming in, not again in T20 batting orders are more flexible, so it's not coming in. It's him coming in with 12 overs left rather than him coming in at 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever it might be. But Tom Banton's a top order player. Being a top order player in white ball cricket is very different from coming in lower down the order. It's very different from either having to start against spin, and Tom Banton can play spin. He's got all those. He's got the shots. He's got the sweeps. He's got the reverse sweeps. But he is someone who likes to hit through the line, as you say, Joe. And batting at the death is harder than it looks. Yeah, being able to hit the ball from ball 1 with the field out is way harder than it looks, and there's not many who can do that consistently really well. I would like Tom Banton to bat 3 behind Roy and Bairstow, Morgan 4, Billings. Actually, I think I wrote down what I'd like my England team to be going into the first one-day international. Obviously, you would expect some rotation, and probably would be a good thing. So Roy and Bairstow opening, you absolutely don't break up that partnership. Banton, Morgan, Billings, Moeen. I'd like to see David Willey at 7, Adil Rashid, Tom Curran, Reece Topley, Saqib Mahmood.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good team. But
A lot of variety. Yeah, it's like a strong ball. It's like even with the people out at the moment.
Would you rather not have like a Root at number 3, who obviously not Root, but someone who the team just
style player?
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know that England have a player like that.
No, that's why I think
in this squad, like I was talking about Sam Hain being a Joe Root replacement, but Joe Root, I mean, he showed this a little bit actually weirdly in the third test, actually in the second innings of that third test. Joe Root can score a runner ball without even really appearing to break out a third gear.
Yeah, his strike rate is 83, which obviously isn't like incredible, but it's not.
I dare say that with a lot of these guys, it's a lot higher in the last few years.
Yeah.
There are Joe Root's got a skill set not many can replicate. But I would like to see Banton batting more like where he bats for Somerset.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are we saying, guys? Here's predictions. 3-0 clean sweep? Or will Ireland somehow nick one?
2-1. But remember in our preview on my podcast, I was focusing on Ireland a little bit, so I had to back Ireland in one ODI. So I'll go 2-1 England.
2-1? Nakul?
I don't like ever predicting whitewashes. I'm not Glenn McGrath, so I'll go 2-1 as well. Yeah, I mean Ireland. We on Guerilla Cricket have followed Ireland very closely because of the fact we were from that Malahide test onwards, and we've done a lot of Ireland cricket since. We covered the T20s and the Test match against Afghanistan in Dehradun. I think we were the only people in the world covering that on audio. Not because we were the official right holder, just because other people don't realise how good some cricket is to follow. But that's a whole different conversation. But Ireland are in an interesting position because they've got actually for the first time in a little while a lot of younger players coming through. That generation that was in the 2011 World Cup squad and the 2015 World Cup squad and starting to creak a little bit has started to be phased out. So Porterfield's really the only one left from that group. Gary Wilson's not in the squad for the first for the first one day international. But you got Paul Sterling is a really really good player. And
same thing on Monday.
Yeah. I'm sorry if this guy is grand you covered. I really like Andy Balbirnie.
Joe, you were saying,
Gareth Delaney's one to watch. I watched quite a lot of the T20 World Cup qualifier. Delaney's only played one day international, and
he's the quick, isn't he? He's the quick bowler.
That's David Delaney, his cousin. Gareth Delaney's a leg spinning all rounder who will probably open with Sterling. But he turns the ball both ways. He's only played one day international, and he's only bowled in one day international. Apologies. He's opened obviously, so he's batted a fair bit. But he's got a really high backlift, and he's very much a sort of he pulls well off the front foot, kind of Ricky Ponting style, and he hits the ball quite hard. And then he could turn the ball both ways. He's got a really good googly. His one day international, Kieran Pollard hit him onto the roof of the stadium a couple of times. But again, and Nicholas Pooran hit him around a few times. But again, running into a set Nicholas Pooran and Kieran Pollard is pretty difficult. Yeah. And then you've got Kevin O'Brien. Nobody needs any introduction to what Kevin O'Brien can do. You've got a lot of spin. You've got a couple of spin bowling all rounders in Simi Singh and Andy McBride's sort of an all rounder. Curtis Campher, who's come into the squad,
South African guy,
ex-South African under-19 player, who actually bowled at Tom Banton in that World Cup, that under-19 World Cup. Fast bowling all rounder who will probably come into the middle order, and then. The worry is, as ever with Ireland, and it's been this way for Ireland for a little while, how are they going to take enough wickets, particularly with the new ball? There's a lot of Josh Little's quite quick, but Mark Adair's injured.
Yeah, that's
he's a big miss. Then you've got a lot of kind of Boyd Rankin is very tall, but isn't necessarily that penetrative. And then you've got guys like Peter Chase and Barry McCarthy who are good bowlers, but can get a little bit hittable if they don't take wickets early. And the worry was, Ireland. I don't think Ireland's best chance is to bat first in pretty much every game. Because if Ireland could find themselves out of the game if they bowl first to this England line.
If Sterling comes off, then
him out or Kevin O'Brien maybe.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and then Ireland can defend 280, 290. I don't think Ireland aren't going to be scoring 320 very often, but no, there's enough there, and there's enough signs that Ireland are on the right track. They lost that 3-match series in the Caribbean under Balbirnie's first test as captain first series as captain, they really should have won the second one. Missed 2 runouts in the last over and really should have won that game. And yeah, I think Ireland will run England hard, and Andy Balbirnie and a lot of the other Irish staff and senior players have been saying we're really tired of just being plucky little Ireland competing and giving teams a scare. We're here. We're a proper serious cricket team. Ireland are, yeah, exactly, and really desperate to play some cricket again after having their entire home calendar wiped out by COVID, and desperate to reestablish themselves and show and essentially and kind of show a little bit of the nonsense of the 10-team World Cup, as Scotland have done a few times. And it's a shame actually Scotland aren't in this ODI World Cup Super League as well. But Ireland certainly will not be lacking motivation, and they've got some really talented players and a team that is beginning to build around the younger generation. England will, I think, ultimately be too strong for them, but I don't expect any walkovers.
No. I
think so. I hope we do get, just from a neutral perspective, we get like a competitive series at least. I think it'll be 3-0 to England. But I think, as you mentioned before, you've obviously outlined there's a variety of quality players in that setup there for Ireland, Nakul. So hopefully they can, not just the Paul Sterlings, etc. I like to see some of the younger players coming through as well. So yeah, it'd be good to see. But yeah, okay, guys. So yeah, thanks so much. Flipping, that was a long one. That was usually
it's weird. It's weird, isn't it? Like, we've had so long without cricket, and suddenly there's too much cricket to cover.
It's so much to talk about.
It's just we could probably go for another hour, but I'm not sure the missus will be too happy with that. So I need to probably wrap it up there. But yeah, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Obviously, thanks very much to Dan for Cricket Fanatics magazine. Obviously, Joe Nuttall 22 yards, and here to Nakul here coming on today for the first time. I really appreciate Nakul and Joe. Hope you guys come on.
Sorry, it would be remiss of me if I didn't tell people how they can listen to Guerilla Cricket.
Oh, please, go ahead, yeah.
So we're covering every ball of the Ireland One Day International Series. We're also covering all of the Pakistan Series, and when it gets confirmed, the Australia Tour, the limited later in the summer. And we'll be doing a lot more. We don't just do England games. We try and cover as much cricket as possible, including, we hope, a lot of the IPL this year, if not all of it. We've done most of it the last couple of years, but we hope to be doing most of it. So yeah, guerillacricket.com is how you can listen to us. We're also on Facebook at Crick Track. We're hosted on an Indian Facebook page called Crick Tracker. We're on YouTube as well, and we're on Hot Mic, which is where you can sync up our commentary to the live TV pictures, and it plays in app.
Okay, that's
sorry, it plays even if you navigate away to another app. The commentary keeps playing, which it doesn't do with YouTube or Facebook, which a lot of people have found really cool. So yeah, that's on iOS and Android. And if you use the code GC Radio at sign up, we get a little bit of extra cash. So yeah, would be remiss of me as a senior committee member of Guerilla Cricket not to get the plug in. But yeah, thank you very much, Shay. It's been a pleasure, mate. And Joe, lovely to connect with you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Fantastic. Hope to see you guys again. Guys, if you like the content, please do obviously like the video, comment, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys on the next one. Cheers.